Okay, Shalom Aleichem. Thank you everyone for coming. First, I'd like to give Hakarat Tov to my Chavrusa, Rav Naftali Skates. I was learning with him up till, about the sugya of Bishul and Shabbos. And then, of course, I was, gave a lot of thought of how I'm going to put this together. And with Rabbi Ariel, literally gave me hours of time to put it together, and we try to do this chabura every other week or something, and it's only one person giving chabura, but then I realized every single time they're giving it, majority of the times where real behind them is himself giving a chabura to that person giving a chabura. So a big hakarat tov to you, Rabbi. Thank you. Not necessarily, but for me, I feel like that was definitely the case, and I'm very appreciative. So thank you. We're gonna start off just talking a little bit about the sugya and what, just a couple of details before we really dive in and start going through the different, Manda Amrim and the different people on talking about the sugya. So the sugya we're going to be talking about originally is Kli Sheni. So Kli Sheni, something that hopefully everyone is a little bit familiar with at least, is in the realm of Bishul on Shabbos. So we know that you can't be mvashal food on Shabbos. All food has to be prepared prior. But when it comes to, for example, heating up food or hot food or how to deal with food, we have different levels and different categories where you put stuff in. Category number one will be obviously food that's still on a fire. Category number two, I'll say, will be Kli Rishon, right, which is still the Baruch Hashem, still hot. It's still ready. It's right to cook. You have to be very careful with. Category number two will be, category number three really, will be a Kli Sheni, which is after I took the food that was cooked in a specific pot and I transferred it to another dish. What's the status of that food? It has a more kuludika status, and then there's another status that I hope everyone's familiar with. If not, we're just gonna touch on it for a little bit. Is a concept of irui. Irui is literally the air. So what happens in the quasi state, which is the state in between a Kli Rishon, when I'm taking from a Kli Rishon and I'm pouring it into a Kli Sheni, what's the din on that? That'll be considered Irui. So once again, you have Kli Rishon, right? It's on the fire. Kli Rishon not on the fire, right? So Kli Rishon not on the fire. Then I have Irui, which is pouring from the Kli Rishon into the second stage of a food status, which is going to be a Kli Sheni. Clear? Everyone has that. Just the basic fundamentals of the sugya on just some of the terms that we all know. So let's dive right in. So we're going to start on Shabbos, Masechet Shabbos, Daf Mem Beis Amud Aleph. There's going to be a Mishnah on the bottom. It says Ha'ilfaz v'Ha'kedera Sheha'avirin Mirutachin Lo Yetel Tocho Tavlin. So if I have an Ilfaz or Kedera, Rashi says the Ilfaz or Kedera, these are two different types of Kli Rishons, right, that are still very hot that I take off of the fire during Ben Hashmashot. So now it's coming Shabbat. Now it's Shabbat now, and it's very, very, very hot, right? Lo yiten l'tocho tavlin. I can't put a spice inside of them. That means any spice, I'll say any food at this time, you can't put it inside this kli because it's going to be considered a kli rishon. And the reason why you can't put it inside is because it's going to cook it. Aval notenhu l'tocha ka'ara or l'toch hatamchui, but you can put it inside type of a ka'ara or a tamchui, and Rashi explains that a ka'ara and a tamchui are two different dishes which are considered a kli sheni, and you can put it inside those. So a kli rishon, you can't put tavlin inside or other foods, and a kli sheni you are able to put tavlin inside. Rabbi Yehuda Amar l'chol hu noten, you're able to put inside anything midavar sheyesh bo chometz v'tzir, except for davar that something has chometz, vinegar, or tzir, like fish juice, or something that are very easily to get cooked. And we go back and forth. The sugya, is Rabbi Yehuda a kula, is Rabbi Yehuda a chumra, and we essentially say the Rabbi Yehuda is a kula, that you're able to put anything in a kli rishon, but we do not hold like Rabbi Yehuda, and we hold like Tanakama that it will be usher for you to put something inside a kli rishon. But the sugya goes a little weiter, and the sugya talks about melach. Now, melach is interesting. The Gemara seems to have a little bit of a difficulty of understanding, is melach like all foods, or is melach different than all different types of foods? And the Gemara says weiter. Savar Rav Yosef lemeimar, melach harehu ketavlin. Rav Yosef wants to say that melach is considered like any type of spice. The bekli rishon bashla, that in kli rishon it's going to cook. Ubekli sheni lo bashla, and it's not going to cook in a kli sheni, similar to any other thing that we learned in our Mishnah. So Amar le Abaya, Tani Rab Chia, I have a Tani Rab Chia that says melach enu ketavlin, that melach is not like tavlin. The bekli sheni nami bashla, that even in a kli sheni it's going to cook. That means it's going to be more machmir than any other tavlin. You can't even put it in a kli sheni. That's how light melach is. But upligi the Rav Nachman, the Amar Rav Nachman, the Rav Nachman says tzricha milcha bishula, that a melach actually needs a strong cook, kibasra detura, like the meat of an ox. Essentially saying a meat of an ox is a very tough type of meat, and it needs a lot of time. Therefore, it's not going to be able to be cooked by a regular cooking. It needs a strong cooking. So there, for sure, it'll be fine in a kli sheni, right? And even a kli rishon, it's not going to be a problem. And Vikad Amri, those learn the machlokes a little differently. That Savar Rabbi Yosef lemeimar, melach harehu ketavlin, the bekli rishon bashla, bekli sheni lo bashla, and then we have Abaya, and this is where we change it up a little bit. So Amar le Abaya, Tani Rab Chia, melach enu ketavlin, the bekli rishon nami lo bashla. That a kli rishon nami is not going to cook at all. V'hanu da Amar Rav Nachman tzricha milcha bishula kibisur detura. That salt needs a strong cooking, that even like an ox, like a meat of an ox, that even in a kli rishon it's not going to cook. So now I have two different brisas in the sugya of melach, of sugya of salt. Well, how do I look at it? Can I pour salt in my crock pot on Shabbos? Am I able to, I taste a little bit, the crock pot is still hot, it's still hot, it's still the kli rishon, they just brought it up, it still needs salt. Am I able to pour salt right inside of it or not? So I have one brisa that sounds like it's saying you cannot, even in kli sheni, that means even in your chulent bowl potentially, you can't put salt. And another brisa that's saying no, you can even put it inside the main pot.
As long as it's off the fire.
As long as it's off the fire. As long as it's off the fire. It's general case, if it's on the fire, you're cooking straight up. And I have so in order to explain this a little, in order to get the pshat on this Gemara, we have Tosafot. That Tosafot says behind the Rav Nachman that even according to Rashi, according to all the poskim, Rabbeinu Tam, we're going to say that the halacha is salt doesn't need to be cooked. Salt is going to be cooked, it can't be cooked even in a kli rishon. That means it's like the second brisa, that it needs a cooking like the cooking of an ox. Therefore, even in your crock pot, you can put it inside. However, he does say that however, you should still be a little choshesh for the Tanakama, and if you don't put it inside, you're going to tavolo bracha. And we see it's a direct correlation we're going to see inside our Shulchan Aruch. Now I'm going to be flipping over to Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, Shin Yud Ches. Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, Shin Yud Ches, Halacha. Tet. Kli Rishon, he says, Afil la'acha she'haviru ma'ala esh. Even after you take it off the fire, mevashel kol zman shiatzu ledebo. It's going to mevashel the entire time, right? That it's going to be still hot. Lefichach asu l'tin l'tocho tavlin. It's also to put inside of it tavlin, which is spices or anything else. Ava melach mutar l'tin l'tocho, but melach you're able to put it inside. Kivan she'avir ma'ala esh. Since you already took it off the fire, the tzricha milcha bishula kibisher detura. That because it needs a strong cooking like the cooking of an ox. How he goes by it says V'yesh misha asur l'tet l'tocho kli zeh basar meliach afilu hu shel shor. However, don't think that just because you're using this analogy, you can put in a strong piece of meat into a kli rishon. It's still going to be asur. And the Rebbe explained the reason it's going to be asur is because you're still cooking the other liquids and stuff inside the meat. Even though the meat might not get cooked by the kli rishon right away, but you are cooking the liquids and so on and so forth inside.
Is the yatz let it go on the pot itself or on the food inside the pot?
The yatz ledbo will be on the pot itself or on the food.
If the pot cool down, you could add spices or what have you.
If the pot cooled down, correct.
When
So
the pot came off the fire and then it cooled down, and then you can add things to it.
yes, so a kli rishon that you took it off the fire, and now I put it aside, and I waited for however long I needed to wait, and it cooled down, then that will be considered already a kli sheni. A kli rishon is only a kli rishon if it's yatz ledbo.
Pretty much means if you could pick up the pot with your hands, it's not that's let it go anymore, right?
I will see how the food is inside also, because the food inside can still be yatz ledbo.
So
And
both.
and the food will be, I would say it'll be both. The food itself also has a din of cooking. And we're gonna touch on that subject very, very soon, about the walls and the pot on the inside. And the Rama goes weiter over here, venirally, the below miliach nami aser, but he's saying even below miliach it was without salt. Ella denakat miliach the belav hachi aser mishum dam. Shuv yesh asurum letet melach afilu b'kli sheni. But however, there are those that are making us to put melach afilu b'kli sheni. Kol zman sheyatz ledabo. So as long as the kli sheni is yatz ledabo, v'lahachmir tavo lo bracha. And when we machmir tavo lo bracha. However, the Ramah now brings a massive kula and says v'im avar. But if you made a mistake, v'natan melach afilu b'kli rishon afilu hu al ha'esh. Even if it's going to be al ha'esh still. She'avad isura, you did an isser, as in don't think that you did the correct thing. You vada did you did the wrong thing, right? However, mutar hamechal, the food itself is not going to be aser, because normally if you vashel food on Shabbos, you do bishul on Shabbos, that food is going to be aser for you. Don't think that you asered the entire food by adding salt into it. Why? The hamelach batal agabe hamechal, because the melach is only tuffle from the mechal, it's just the additive, right? And the reason why melach will have such a different distinction, it's interesting, because you would think that all food should be in the same category. What's the difference between garlic powder and salt, or black pepper and salt? Why should it be a nafkamina? Well, the reason is because melach, we say it was a mineral. It cooks differently, it acts differently, right? Therefore, it's a stronger type of material, and it's cooking like an ox, and it needs a strong cook like an ox. Therefore, that's why it's mutter to put inside afilu b'kli rishon, which is a massive chiddush, that you could pour salt directly inside. Like if they bring out the cholent in the big crock pot, right? They bring it upstairs. That's a kli rishon. It's hot. They're having like 80 tissues on each hand to hold it up. It's a mamash kli rishon, right? You could pour salt directly inside of it without a problem. However, tavola bracha if you don't do it.
It just doesn't ask for the food.
No, it's mutter to do that. It's mutter to do that. If it's on the fire, yeah, if it's on the fire itself, let's say it's actually on the fire, you open your pot, of course, whatever it is, and you pour salt inside of it, it was usher to do.
It's not all spices, it's salt.
Strictly salt. Strictly salt. All other spices, for example, if you taste a cholent upstairs and you see it's missing black pepper, you can't start adding black pepper to that massive crock pot. You have to first put it inside a kli sheni, and once you put it inside a kli sheni, then you're able to put inside black pepper, garlic powder, or any other spices that you want.
Is taking it off the fire?
You don't have to wait until it cools off. So that's the beautiful thing about kli sheni. Kli sheni, doesn't make a difference if the food itself is hot.
So the food could be yatz.
The food is going to be yatz ledabo, the kli sheni, but it's not going to make a nafkamina. It's going to be the kli sheni.
If I take it off the crock pot and put it on a countertop, can I add pepper to it? Does that render the cliche?
Out of the first pot.
No, it's still in the pot. It's still in the pot. I would say not, but I'm gonna bring the next Gemara and Tosfot that's gonna be touching more on the concept of cliche. So this first piece, we're just a nice side point about melach, about a distinction, and just a little introduction. But this piece of Gemara I want to teach you is a fundamental Tosafot that is necessary to understand what actually is a cliche. And let's touch on that. There's a very interesting story right? Back in the Gemara, Odaf Memud Beis, there's a very interesting story that happened. So it says, Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi. Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi says, Pam echad nichnasti acher Rebbe lebeit hamirchatz. One time, I went after Rebbe into the Beit HaMirchatz. Ubekashti la'aniach lo pach shel shemen ba'ambati. And he wanted to put a pach shel shemen into the ambati. Now, you have for sure have some sort of, feeling on this, but essentially this is the case. It was on Shabbat, right? They're going on Shabbat to the Chamet Tveria. That means they're going to the hot springs over there, and it's mutter for them to take a bath inside those hot springs on Shabbat. And he goes inside there, and he asks Rebbe, can I juice it up a little? Can I make it a spa? Can I add some oil? Can I add some nice smelling stuff inside the water? So when we're taking a bath, it'll be more refreshing for us. Va'amar li, and Rebbe said to me, Tol b'kli sheni. Put it inside a kli sheni. Essentially, this is what he wanted to do. He said the way it was working, this way Rashi explains it. When they went to the well springs of Tiberia, when they went to the geysers of Tiberia, the geysers came up and it was collected inside a bowl. Then they were able, through a channel of levees or so on, push the water into another separate basin where they're able to bathe. So the original basin that the water was collected in, that water will be daimed to Kli Rishon, because it was coming directly from the fire of the earth, right? Directly from the core of the earth. That is going to be considered Kli Rishon. However, once they moved the levee and they were able to transfer the water from one basin to a secondary basin of water, that now essentially made it into a Kli Sheni. So he says you're able to put the water inside a Kli Sheni.
It's not talking about food.
Yeah, but it's talking about the...
It's talking about
cooking.
shemen. I think the idea is where they're bathing is considered a kli rishon off the fire.
Right.
And he's telling him, tol b'kli sheni, take the water from here, put it in a kli sheni, and then you could heat up the oil.
Correct. So let's go back. They're taking the bath. They're mutter for them to take a bath. I feel b'kli rishon. They're not cooking themselves, right? However, the sugya was really on the oil, the actual oil that he wants to put inside for them to start feeling good, right? What is going to be the din on that oil? So Rabbi is telling him, you can't put the oil in the Kli Rishon. This is a Kli Rishon still. So if you put it in here, it's going to be cooking it.
But isn't it anyway a yad? It has to be yad salad as well.
Yeah.
So if it's yad salad as well, they can't take a bath in it. It must be that Chametz Friday would never yad salad as well, because you can't take a bath in something that's yad salad as well. The idea is that you would be burned if you would touch it. No. So
that's sugya the temperatures of Yad Saleh. It could be that it is not as hot as you think, or it could be just for a baby, how baby clothes handle the way you get burnt, that you might be able to handle it. So Yad Saleh but might not to be the instant like second degree burn.
Is very different than actual, like let's say natural water that's hot as opposed to water that's cooked? Does it have any difference?
I mean, the Chamet Tveria, the reason why it's going to be considered a Kli Rishon is because it is coming straight up from the heat source. The heat source is the earth and the molten lava under the earth that is pushing out the hot water.
But so there's no difference between...
I mean, if I put water in the sun and it gets warm,
Yeah.
and that won't be a Kli Rishon.
Why not?
Well, because it does not attach to the heat source. There was never.
So it's only when it's attached to the heat source.
I think that it would need to be attached to a heat source prior. No, I think it needed to be attached to the heat source prior.
That's why you can use Dut Shemesh in Israel.
That's why they said Dut Shemesh you could start using that. So yeah.
Eating in the sun, cooking in the sun is a completely different thing.
Tiberia's water comes from the hot
No, it's a
ground.
machloket in the Gemara. Yeah, one shita says that Chametz Tiberia is cooked because the chalif apitche Gehenna, it's being cooked from the openings of Gehenna.
And the other shita?
Somewhere deep in there. The other shita, I believe, holds it's being heated up from the sun, but we're not going like that.
Right. So then.
But what happens if the kedisheni, the pot, retains the same heat as the kedushin? Is it considered kedushin?
What do you mean it retains the same heat?
Let's say you have a cup. When you pour it in, the water does not change any temperature.
So.
Is that considered kedushin still?
So that is a great question, and Tosafot is about to answer your exact question. Tosafot says, "V'shma mina kli sheinu ein mavashal." Now he asks a question, exactly what Chacham was saying. So Tema, I have a question. Ma shena kli sheni mikli rishon? What's the nafka mina between a kli sheni and a kli rishon? The iyad soledet afilu ka kli sheni nami. The if it's yad soledet bo, even if it's in a kli sheni, who cares? It's just as hot. So why would a klisheni make a difference? It's just as hot. The temperature didn't change. You can't tell a temperature. Why would it make a nafkamina between the two? V'i en yad soledet afilu kli rishon nami en mevasha. And if it's not yad soledet, but afilu kli rishon, what's a nafkamina? So essentially, he's saying, why would there ever be a distinction between a kli rishon and between a klisheni? Why should there ever be a distinction between the two? V'yesh lomar. Lefi shekli rishon mitoch sha'amud al ha'or, because since the kli rishon itself was standing on the fire itself, dofanotav chamin, the walls got hot. Umachazik cham'o zman meruba, and it will retain its heat for a longer period of time. Therefore, since it is going to retain its heat for a long period of time, the rabbi said you can't put it inside for any amount of time, right? For example, like even if you'll say this piece of meat needed, 20 minutes to cook, and I know after a kli rishon it will cool down after 15 minutes, so I'm not cooking the meat. Therefore, but they didn't make a distinction. It said right now it's a kli rishon, right now it's yatz ledabo. Even though it may cool down later, we're assuming that right now it's going to hold its heat forever. And we're going to leave it inside, and you can't put anything inside. Obviously, once it lost its heat, and you're able to say for sure it's not a kli rishon anymore, it's not a kli rishon. Right? But this is talking about when it's still hot. Shayatz ledabo, aser. Aval kli sheni, but a kli sheni. Af agav the yatz ledabo, like Achab's case, mutar. It's mutar. It's not going to be considered like a kli rishon, she'en defanotav chamin v'holech u'mitkar, because the walls itself are not hot, therefore it's going to go quickly and it's going to become cold, right? So exactly, Chacham, that answers your question. Now I have a kli rishon, right? A cup of hot water. I poured it inside a regular cup. I poured it inside another cup. It didn't lose any heat. Feels just as hot. You put it inside. You put your finger inside, you'll get burnt. What's the nafkamina between the two? The nafkamina Tosa was saying is the actual walls. The walls are what's going to make it. The walls are it's going to change the status of it.
So if I pour it into an insulation cup, like a Stanley cup, that is meant to keep water hot for a very, very long time, long amount of time, then it would be problematic according to this Tosa.
No, because the walls itself aren't hot. The walls itself aren't hot.
What's keeping it?
The wall is cold. When you put the heat, doesn't they let the heat go out? But still the wall is cold.
In the case of Tosafot saying, it sounds like the heat of the walls is what's rejuvenating the heat of the inside. It's not letting it dissipate. Even though you're right, in your case, they make all these fancy thermoses that are all triple insulated, and they can last for a long period of time. However, the way it was learned was that since you never put your Stanley cup on the fire to get hot.
But if I did that, that would be problematic.
If you did that, for sure, it's a kli rishon. You can't do that because your walls are hot, the stuff inside there are hot.
No, I mean, if I had like an empty cup on a fire and then I had a full cup,
for sure, no, that's
and then took that both up and poured it into the cup, the empty cup that was on top of the fire, that would still be kli rishon.
That would be considered. I'll say that would be considered kli rishon, but I don't. The Gemara doesn't talk about. The Gemara doesn't talk about that case.
The walls are hot, so it is.
Yeah, it sounds like it'll be considered a kli rishon. So
Just
what?
to be mekayim the iser.
Yeah, just to be kind of Isser. Itzik wants to be kind of Isser. He's able to heat up an empty kettle and pour inside. Take it. Then you have to make sure you take it off the fire, because if it's on the fire and you pour it inside, then it's a kli rishon, for sure. So you heat up a kli rishon, you heat up a kettle, whatever. There's no water inside. You take it off the fire. You pour water inside of it, right? I think that would be considered a kli rishon still.
I think it's the Mishnah before that talks to a similar case. I don't remember 100%, but
Yeah, I didn't do that.
Is it like
Can you go? Can you
is it a zero of Rabbanan that we're worried that if you cook If you don't put it in Kli Sheni, you're gonna come to cook. Is it like zero? This is the Isser D'Oraita.
And put it back up and you don't need to change it up.
I don't understand the question.
I think I believe it's going to be considered an Isser D'Rabbanan. It's going to be Isser D'Rabbanan. Bishul, mamash be bishul, like on a fire. Yeah, bishul be considered bishul on the fire. Yeah, there's the whole Kli Rishon, whole Kli Sheni. Yeah. And Rabbi, correct me if I'm wrong. The whole concept, of Kli Rishon and Kli Sheni is all D'Rabbanan. The Raisa, the real Isser of bishul is mamash alei esh.
No, even a Kli Rishon also off the fire also could be D'Oraita.
Kli Rishon off the fire could also be
I
D'Oraita.
believe so. It's a good question. I believe so. Not 100%, but I believe so.
Okay.
So let's say like in this case, in the Kli Sheni, even if it cools down quickly, it shouldn't make any difference. No? Meaning, let's say it's 120 degrees, who cares if it cools down quickly? But 120 degrees, I put something in there, cooking is cooking. I don't care if it's in Kli Revi'i even.
No, but once they say that a Kli Sheni doesn't cook,
That's what I'm saying,
yeah, it's not gonna cook. It's not gonna cook. It's not gonna be considered cooked.
Even if it's hot.
Even if it's gonna get hot.
It's 120 degrees and I put it.
Yeah.
Meaning because the walls don't keep adding.
Yeah, since the walls aren't gonna be keeping adding it, we're not gonna say that it's something that's gonna be cooked.
Even for that 1 split second.
Yeah, I'm saying.
I think it should be mentioned.
The Kali Bishul. Let's back up. There are some things that are considered Kali Bishul that I feel be Kli Sheni are also going to be problematic. You can't even rinse water with them. That you can't even pour hot water on top, because if that is the last thing that needs to get cooked, just put that next to that little heat, and you do that, that's going to be considered Bishul on Shabbos, because that's the Bishul for that thing, right? So we're talking about regular things that need a basic amount of time for heating, and not talking about things that need instantaneous, heating, like the sugya, like a herring or like a oily fish or something like that. That even pouring water on it is the gemar melachta of it. We're not talking about those cases. Huh? Eggs are considered kali bishul? Yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, so now we understand a little bit more about the concept and Tosafot, this main Tosafot, that a lot of these other, achronim are going to start building and start trying to leverage the Tosafot to sound like them. That the dofanot are what is going to be, determining if it's going to be considered Kli Rishon or a Kli Sheni. So now we are going to jump to Yoredea. In order to get this full sugya, we're going to have to go into a little bit of Isser V'Heter as well. Talking about different meats, the sugya is really intertwined and they jump on top of each other. Like cooking in the kitchen, if you have Isser food and you have kosher food, and they touch and they mix and so on and so forth, the sugyas mix a lot. So I'm just going to give a little sugya outside that if hot meat falls on top of, you have two pieces of hot meat fall on top of each other, one's Isser, one's kosher, it's gonna answer everything, right? If one of them's hot, one of them's not hot, so we look at the bottom one. If the bottom one is hot, then it's gonna answer everything. If the top one is hot, it's only gonna answer Kedei Klipa, right? You take it off, it's gonna be answer Kedei Klipa. Now, if you put them side by side, so that's what we're gonna talk about. So we have the Ramah in this sugya. So it's Yoredea Kufhei Sifkatan Gimel. It says Lo Bari Ella Bechub Kli Rishon. This is all talking about if it falls on top of each other and they all these things become Isser. It's only talking about Chum Kli Rishon. Kigon Miyad She'asur Min Ha'esh Menicho Im Ha'heter Aval Im Kavar Menuach B'Kli Sheni V'Ach Kach Meniach Ha'heter Etzlo O Alav Enu Asar Klal De Kli Sheni Enu Asar Kemoshen Itbar V'Im Haniach Ze Etzel Ze Im Shnehem Chamin Mechum Kli Rishon Hakol Isser V'Im Echad Sonen Ha'heter Tzarech Klipa V'Makom Shenaga. So the Ramah now brings an interesting case. He says a case of, let's say I take a let's say I take a itzer, right? A itzer or a heter piece of meat, and I cook it and it's in a kli rishon by itself, and I take another piece of meat and I put it right next to it, so it's touching, right? The brims are touching. What's the halakha in that case? Halakha in that case is you take a kedei klipa, right? On that case. So what do we see from this case? That even though they're in the same pot, but they're all touching side by side, there's no liquids moving them around, the heat only transfers a little bit on the side. So the shach starts bringing a svara on the sugya. And it says, the shach is in Simchatan Chet, it says, V'im shneim cham mechum kli rishon. V'dat ma'ashal. The davar gush. Now, a davar gush is, let's explain. There's two different types of foods, right? One is going to be a davar lach, that a dish that is liquidy, that has a lot of that's liquid that will transfer. Another one is, for example, if you're just roasting a piece of steak, right? So just a regular piece, dry by itself. Kegon chatecha basar, a piece of meat, or dag, or fish, or orez, or rice, or docher, and different type of grains. The ma'arin cham min hakadera, that you take it out cham, it's really hard for the kadera. Im hayatzu ledepo, if it's yatzu ledepo, dino le'olam kekli rishon. Its din le'olam is going to be considered like a kli rishon. That means even though I transferred it from one dish to another dish, it's going to be considered a kli rishon. And it's interesting because we just learned that if I take a dish, right? If I take chulet and I put it into a second bowl, that bowl seemingly will be considered a kli sheni. But if I take a piece of steak or a potato or rice that's hot, even if I transfer it, it's not going to be considered a kli sheni, because he's going to consider it still a kli rishon. It says v'en bi'adi la'achriya rak nirali kivan dahat tosvot perak kira, and he brings our tosvot katvu dahatam l'chalek ben kli rishon l'kli sheni, the kli rishon kivan she'omed ala or. The difference between kli rishon and kli sheni is that since kli rishon is standing on the fire, dofenotav chamin u'machazik chamos man meruba, that the walls are going to be able to hold the heat a long time. Imke nira dahakol talib defanas, that the whole sugya of kli rishon and kli sheni in regards to the eichel inside the food is only talking about the walls itself. So imkain devar gush, that a piece of meat, nami kivan the mikri yavish, this is dry, lo shayach bad defanos, doesn't touch the walls. So if it doesn't touch the walls, it's not going to have any the walls are not going to make any distinction to this food. Therefore, if I take it out and I put it onto a plate, since the walls aren't what's defining it, because it's not touching the walls regardless, therefore, that is going to be considered a kli rishon.
It's touching the bottom, that's a wall.
Huh? We're talking about the actual walls to hold it up. You're right. The bottom is a wall, but it's still.
That's getting all the heat.
No, it's the walls spread out. The heat goes in the bottom, but it also spreads out. It's going to spread everywhere else with a good pop.
I'm saying it's still, the piece of meat is still on a wall.
Right. The piece of meat is definitely still on there. Right. But for example, let's say you grill it.
But now you're taking it off.
Let's say you grill it. Let's say I take it. I'm saying let's say I take it, a piece of meat, and I put it on a barbecue, on a sikh on a barbecue, right? So it's not touching any walls. What's the status of that piece of meat? Put it from one plate to another plate. So since they never had those walls that are retaining its heat, didn't need those walls to cook it. I guess he's going in that same concept that is going to be considered still a kli rishon. That as long as the piece of meat, fish, rice, potato, whoever it is, devar yavish, is going to be still hot, yatz ledebo, it's going to be considered, I feel if you change the plates to it, it's going to be considered like a kli rishon.
So no adding salt?
You can add salt to kli rishon.
It's considered a kli rishon off the fire.
It's considered kli rishon off the fire.
Put salt.
You can put salt on there, right? So this is the dat the maharshal, and this is the dat of the maharshal. This is the dat of the Isva Heter, and they argue on the Ramah. The Ramah seems to be saying that it's going to be considered like any other dish, right? That will just be ketei klipa. We're moving it around, right? Just as long on top, on the side, doesn't make a difference. But he's considering it like a mamish, like a davar yavish, right? So now, to understand this, I want to just sort of it's getting a little long, so I'm gonna quickly tie up the halacha. Tie up the halacha a little bit. We have the Tosafot over here that says that it's what is considered Kirishon Klisheni. It's the walls itself. We have the Maharshal, right? That is saying, and it's Veheter that's saying, oh, you know what Tosafot's talking about? If we could derive from that Tosafot that a Devar Gush, a piece of meat or a piece of ora, something like that, would still be considered Kli Rishon. That means if you take your rice, you can't put Kol Chorosh top of it, it'll still be considered Kli Rishon. Now, what is the halacha going to be like? Because we have the Ramah, we have the Maharshal, and we have another Magen Avraham in Shin Yuchet. He sort of brings the Maharshal, and he says that no, this is what the Shulchan Aruch says. The Shulchan Aruch brings a case of if I take garlic oil and I put it on my meat and I try to roast it, what's the halacha? It says usher to do, and the Magen Avraham says lav dafka if you put it next to the fire, even if the meat is hot, it still be considered cooking, right? Because it's a davar gush, and he's trying to implement that in the Shulchan Aruch himself. So what is the exact halacha? So in order to do that, we have to, I guess, look at Chacham Ovadia and get the final halacha. The final halacha that Chacham Ovadia says is he brings it in Shin Samach Zayin Tet Zayin in the Chazon Ovadia Hilchot Bishul. It says, Masha Amarnu Shekli Shenu Ein Mevashal. This that we say that a Kli Shenu is not going to be Mevashal, Af Al Pisha Yad Soledebo, that even if it's going to be Yad Soledebo, Ein Havdil Bezeh Ben Marak Hanotem Bekli Sheni Shiu Davar Lach Ben Davar Gush Kigun Orez Vinoten Basar Vekadoime Shel Olam Kol Shaha Over Lekli Sheni Shuv Ein Mevashal. So the Chazon Ovadia says there's no distinction between a Davar Gush and a Davar Lach, that no matter what it is, it's going to be considered, if you move it into another pot, it's going to be considered a klisheni. The alpha pisha yad soledebo, even if it's going to be yad soledebo, if it's in a klisheni, it's fine. Ulchen muta la'arot marak sonen l'toch orez cham shayad soledebo sheniten beklisheni. Therefore, it's muta to put, for example, if I have very hot rice, I can put chorosh on top of it, and it's not going to be considered that I'm cooking the chorosh. She'ein bezeh iser mishum bishul achar bishul balach. Since the klishenu ain't a vashal klal, klishenu is not a vashal klal. So now, how does Chacham Ovadia get to his maskana? So the halacha is that we're going to hold it's not going to be considered that. But why does he say that? He says because there is a lot of svek svekas, I think is the best way to put it, right? A lot of svek svekas, a lot of tzirufim, a lot of different machlokets going back. So first we know the machloket between the Ramah and the Maharshal, right? The Ramah says there's no nafkamina between a Devar Gush. There's no nafkamina between the Devar Gush and Devar Marak, a wet liquid. And the Maharshal says that no, Devar Gush is considered like a klisheni. We see that the Magen Avraham says that that the Maharshal was saying in Yordea by Isser Heter applies to Shabbat. He brings it by Ar Sugya, but there's a Chevet Dat that says, the Chevet Dat Simat Tzadik Aleph, it says that no, this concept of the Maharshal only applies in Isser Heter, because Isser Heter, all I need to transfer between the two are blias, little pieces of feeling, little pieces of tastes. But in regards to Shabbos, I need a mamash of cooking. Therefore, I'm not going to make that distinction by Shabbos, and there's not going to be anything. There's no issue with Devar Gush, right? And he never would have said that by Devar Gush. And then we also have another tziruf in regards to Irui, between the Rashbam and Rabbeinu Tam. The Irui, according to Rashbam, says Irui is like a klisheni, that if I pour from a hot cup directly onto a food, that's going to sit like a klisheni. That's what to do. Even though it's going to get hot, it's going to warm it up. According to Rabbeinu Tam, it's also to do that, right? Because you need to first pour it into another cup, and Iro is considered like a Kli Rishon. Therefore, you have to wait till it hits another cup, another basin, and then from there, it changes the status to more Kul Dika status. Remember, we hold, just Agav, another point, we don't hold like the Rashbam, we hold like the Tosafot over here. That means you see a lot of times people without really knowing, without making a mistake, they'll take turkey salad in their bowl for Kiddush, or they'll take another salad, and then they'll take a cholent, they'll take another, Mikli Rishon, put it right on top of their turkey salad, put it right on top of something else.
Isn't the ladle considered a Kiddush?
So the ladle is a machloket if the ladle is considered like a klisheni or not. However, since I would assume by the Kiddush, the ladle is mamish inside of it most of the time, right? The ladle itself now has a din of a Kli Rishon, according to a lot of opinions, and we should be machor for those opinions, that the ladle itself is diamond like a Kli Rishon, and when you pour it on top, even though you're using a ladle, it's still diamond like Kli Rishon. You pour it on top of there, it was Iru Kli Rishon still. So now I have my turkey salad, and I pour chol directly on top of it. I'm cooking the onions, I'm cooking the other things inside of there that weren't necessarily cooked. If I have a salad, all the pieces of the salad are raw, you have the lettuce, all the stuff like that, you pour the cholent on it, you have a problem. So what you should do is go for the cholent first, take the cholent, now your cholent's a klisheni. Once you take the cholent, put your turkey salad right on top, and that won't be an issue. But if you do it the other way around, you can run into serious special problems on Shabbos. So now, Chabad takes these three sirufim. They says that if I want to learn the Rashbam and Rabbeinu Tam, right? Let's say if I hold like the Rashbam, that's going to be considered klisheni by Devar Gush. For sure, Devar Gush is going to be considered already a klisheni because it hit the air. That's what it needed. But let's say we hold like Rabbeinu Tam, which we do, right? Then I have the machloket between the Maharsha and the Rabbah. If I hold like the Rabbah, then Devar Gush is going to be okay. But if I hold like the Maharsha, it's still going to be a problem. And then I have a machlok between the Chavedat and the Magen Avraham, that the Magen Avraham says it's still a problem, and the Chavedat says it's not a problem. Therefore, I have so many tzirufim. It says it's mutter that a Devar Gush, like your potatoes, your rice, whatever it is, if you just move it from one dish to another dish, it's going to be considered a Kli Sheni.
Wow, Baruch.